A mother's worst nightmare became reality on a warm September afternoon in 1995. 7-year-old Emma Richardson vanished from Riverside Park in broad daylight, surrounded by dozens of families enjoying the last days of summer. Within minutes, she was gone. No witnesses, no leads, no trace. For 23 years, her disappearance remained one of the most haunting unsolved cases in Ohio's history. But in 2018, a maintenance worker installing new security cameras at that same playground made a discovery that would crack open a mystery 2 decades old and reveal a truth so disturbing it would shake an entire community to its core. September 14th, 1995, 3:47 in the afternoon. That's the exact moment Emma's mother, Patricia Richardson, glanced away from the swings. She was chatting with another parent, discussing school fundraisers and fall soccer schedules. Normal conversation. A normal day. When she turned back 30 seconds later, the swing was empty, still moving slightly from momentum. Emma's pink backpack sat abandoned in the wood chips below. Patricia called her name. Once. Twice. Then she started running. Within minutes, the entire park erupted into chaos. Parents scattered in every direction, calling out for a little girl with blonde pigtails wearing a yellow sundress and white sneakers. Someone called 911 at 3:52. Police arrived at 4:06. By 4:30, the park was swarming with officers, search dogs, and volunteers. By nightfall, over 200 people were combing through nearby woods, checking every house, every yard, every abandoned building within a 5-mile radius. They found nothing. Emma Richardson had simply vanished into thin air. The investigation consumed the small town of Millbrook, Ohio. Population 12,000. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where people don't lock their doors, where children ride bikes until streetlights flicker on. This wasn't supposed to happen here. FBI agents descended within 48 hours. They interviewed every single person who had been at the park that afternoon. 73 individuals. Every parent, every child old enough to speak, every jogger who passed through, every dog walker, every person who might have seen something, anything. The interviews revealed a terrifying truth. Nobody saw Emma leave. Not one person witnessed her walking away, being led away, or being carried away. She was there, and then she wasn't, like a magic trick. But this was no illusion. Detectives pieced together Emma's last known movements with painful precision. At 3:38, she was on the monkey bars with 2 other children, laughing, playing the floor is lava game kids love. At 3:41, she ran to her mother asking for a juice box from their cooler. Patricia gave her the juice and watched her skip back toward the playground. At 3:43, Emma was seen by multiple witnesses going down the big slide, the tall yellow one that curved. At 3:45, another child remembered seeing her near the swings. And then silence. Somewhere in those next 2 or 3 minutes, Emma Richardson ceased to exist in the world her family knew. The media storm was immediate and relentless. Local news stations ran her photo every hour. National networks picked up the story within a week. Emma's face appeared on milk cartons, billboards, and missing persons databases across the country. The Richardson family's phone rang constantly with tips, most leading nowhere. Psychics called claiming to know where she was. Conspiracy theorists spun wild tales. The genuine leads were investigated thoroughly. A man reported seeing a child matching Emma's description at a rest stop 2 hours away that same evening. Officers raced there, interviewed staff, reviewed receipts, checked surveillance footage. Nothing. Another caller swore they saw Emma in the back seat of a blue sedan heading south on Route 27 around 4:15. Police stopped every blue sedan in 3 counties. Dead end after dead end. Patricia Richardson became a fixture on television, pleading for her daughter's return, begging whoever took Emma to bring her home. Her husband Michael stood beside her, stoic but crumbling inside. They had a younger son, 6-year-old Daniel, who asked every single night when his sister was coming home. The family offered a reward. $5,000 at first, then 10, then 25. Local businesses contributed. The reward climbed to $75,000. Still, no concrete information emerged. Investigators followed every protocol, pursued every theory. Was it a stranger abduction? A family acquaintance? Someone who had been watching Emma, waiting for the perfect moment? The park had no security cameras in 1995, no digital footprint, no technological breadcrumbs to follow, just witness statements, most of them fragmented and unreliable. 3 months into the investigation, police focused on a potential suspect. Derek Morrison, 34 years old, lived 6 blocks from Riverside Park. He had no criminal record, worked as an electrician, kept to himself. But neighbors mentioned he often walked through the park, even though he had no children. One witness thought maybe, possibly, they had seen him there that afternoon. Maybe. The uncertainty was maddening. Detectives brought Morrison in for questioning. He cooperated fully, answered every question, agreed to a polygraph test. He passed. His alibi checked out. He had been working at a construction site across town when Emma disappeared. Foreman confirmed it. Co-workers confirmed it. Time cards confirmed it. Morrison was cleared, but the suspicion followed him anyway. He moved away within 6 months, unable to escape the whispers and sideways glances. As weeks turned into months, then years, the case went cold. Not for lack of effort. Detectives never stopped working it. Every new lead, no matter how thin, was investigated. But leads became scarce. The task force was reduced. Media coverage dwindled. The public's attention moved to other tragedies, other missing children. But for the Richardson family, time stood still. Patricia kept Emma's room exactly as it was. Toys arranged the way Emma left them. Clothes folded in drawers. A half-finished drawing of a rainbow still on her desk. Michael threw himself into work, barely sleeping, trying to outrun the guilt and grief. Daniel grew up in the shadow of his missing sister, surrounded by her absence at every family gathering, every holiday, every birthday that passed without her. The community of Millbrook never fully recovered either. Parents became hypervigilant. Playgrounds that once echoed with unsupervised laughter became spaces of constant watching. Trust eroded. Fear settled in. And beneath it all, a terrible question hung in the air. If it could happen to Emma Richardson, it could happen to anyone. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. 15 years passed. Emma would have been 22 years old in 2010. The anniversary still brought news coverage, but less each year. Patricia had aged decades in those 15 years. She and Michael divorced in 2003. The strain was too much. Different grieving styles, different coping mechanisms, different beliefs about what happened. Michael eventually remarried and moved to Colorado, trying to build a new life while never forgetting his daughter. Patricia stayed in Millbrook, unable to leave the last place Emma had been. She volunteered with organizations for families of missing children. She attended every vigil, every awareness event. She kept Emma's case alive any way she could. Daniel Richardson grew into a quiet, serious young man. He became a criminal justice major in college, driven by his sister's case. He wanted to understand. He needed to understand. How does a child vanish in broad daylight? How do investigations fail? What gaps exist in the system? His studies became personal research. He reviewed Emma's case file obsessively, with permission from the detective who still officially held the case. Detective Sarah Chun had taken over in 2002 when the original lead investigator retired. She was thorough, compassionate, and haunted by Emma's unsolved disappearance. She and Daniel formed an unusual partnership. She shared information. He offered fresh perspectives. Together, they kept hope alive, however faint. Then came 2018, 23 years after Emma vanished. The town of Millbrook received a community development grant to upgrade infrastructure in public spaces. Riverside Park was selected for improvements, new playground equipment, resurfaced paths, better lighting, and for the first time, security cameras. The installation was handled by a local company, Morrison Security Systems. No relation to Derek Morrison, the man once suspected in Emma's disappearance. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. During installation, Workers had to dig post holes for camera mounting poles. One hole was designated near the old swing set area, close to where Emma was last seen. On October 9th, 2018, a worker named Thomas Brennan was digging that hole. His auger hit something solid at about 4 feet down. He assumed it was a rock. Happened all the time. He adjusted position, tried again. Same resistance. Frustrated, Thomas climbed into the shallow hole to investigate manually. He brushed away dirt, expecting to find a boulder. Instead, his fingers touched something smooth, plastic. He cleared more dirt. His heart began to race. It was a container of some kind, rectangular, about the size of a large shoebox. Sealed tight. Thomas stopped digging immediately and called his supervisor. The supervisor called the project manager. The project manager called the police. Detective Sarachin arrived at Riverside Park at 11:30 that morning. The container had been carefully excavated and sat on a tarp, covered in dried mud. It appeared to be a waterproof storage box, the kind used for camping or storing important documents. It was sealed with heavy-duty tape, weathered but intact. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she photographed it from every angle. This was the same park, the same area, buried for what could be decades. The timing, the location, it all pointed to one possibility, a possibility she barely dared to consider. The container was transported to the police station and opened in the presence of detectives, a forensic specialist, and the chief of police. Inside, they found items that made Sarah's blood run cold. A child's pink backpack, faded but recognizable. A yellow fabric, deteriorated but clearly once a dress. Small white sneakers, size for a 7-year-old. A juice box, the brand discontinued years ago. And at the bottom, a laminated student ID card from Millbrook Elementary School. The photo showed a little girl with blonde pigtails and a gap-toothed smile. The name read, Emma Richardson. Grade 2. The room fell silent. Sarah fought back tears. After 23 years, they had found something. Not Emma, not answers, but proof. Proof that someone had taken these items. Proof that someone had buried them deliberately. Proof that Emma's disappearance was not random, not spontaneous. It was planned, calculated, and whoever did it had returned to this park, to this specific spot, to hide evidence. But there was more in that container. Beneath Emma's belongings, wrapped in plastic, was a notebook, small, spiral-bound, the kind a child might use for a diary. The pages were filled with handwriting, not a child's handwriting, adult handwriting, neat, methodical, disturbing. The entries were dated, starting September 15th, 1995, one day after Emma disappeared. Sarah began reading, and the words made her stomach turn. The notebook was a confession of sorts, but not the kind investigators expected. The writer never used names, never explicitly stated what happened to Emma. Instead, the entries were cryptic, coded, written in a strange third-person perspective. They described watching a child, following patterns, waiting for the right moment. The language was detached, clinical, devoid of emotion. September 15th's entry read, "The acquisition was successful. Subject secure. Phase 1 complete. September 20th. Subject adapting slowly. Resistance minimal now. October 3rd. Relocated items to predetermined location. Ensured depth adequate for long-term concealment." The entries continued sporadically over several months. December's notes became stranger. Subject education progressing. New identity taking hold. Previous life fading as designed. March 1996. Subject health stable. Monitoring continues. Integration phase beginning. And then, in May 1996, a final entry. Project concluded. Subject relocated to permanent placement. All evidence secured. Closure achieved. Investigators were dealing with something far more calculated than a crime of opportunity. This was someone organized, patient, methodical. Someone who had planned Emma's abduction carefully. Someone who kept records, followed protocols, thought of themselves as conducting some kind of project. The psychological profile was chilling. This wasn't passion or impulse. This was control. Sarah immediately reopened the investigation with full resources. The notebook was sent for forensic analysis. Handwriting experts, linguistic specialists, psychological profilers all examined the entries. DNA testing was conducted on every item in the container, using technology far more advanced than what existed in 1995. Fingerprints were lifted from the notebook pages, the plastic wrapping, the container itself. Meanwhile, Sarah faced an impossible decision. Should she tell Patricia Richardson what they found? She made the call on October 11th. Patricia hadn't heard from Detective Chun in months. When her phone rang and she saw the name, her heart stopped. Sarah chose her words carefully. They had found evidence. Important evidence. But not Emma. Not yet. Patricia asked the question Sarah knew was coming. Is she alive? Sarah couldn't answer. She didn't know. The notebook suggested Emma had been alive for months after her disappearance, possibly longer. But what happened after that final entry? Where was this permanent placement? Was Emma still out there somewhere, living under a different name, with no memory of her real family? Or had something terrible happened that the writer simply didn't document? The media exploded when news of the discovery leaked. Within 24 hours, every major network was covering the story. The park where Emma disappeared was back under intense scrutiny. Theories proliferated online. Amateur detectives dissected every word of the notebook entries that were made public. The case became a national obsession again, but with a new, terrifying dimension. This wasn't just about a missing child anymore. This was about someone who potentially kidnapped children as projects, who documented their crimes, who buried evidence like trophies. Forensic results started coming back. DNA was extracted from several items. Most matched Emma, confirming these were indeed her belongings. But there was other DNA too. Trace amounts on the notebook. Partial fingerprints on the plastic wrapping. The samples were run through every database available. CODIS, the FBI's criminal database. State and local databases. Nothing matched. Whoever buried this container had never been arrested, never been fingerprinted for any official purpose. They were a ghost. Handwriting analysis provided some insights. The writer was likely male, educated, probably middle-aged at the time based on writing style and vocabulary. The linguistic patterns suggested someone familiar with technical or scientific writing. Methodical, detail-oriented, possibly worked in a field requiring documentation and precision. Psychology experts painted a disturbing picture. This person viewed Emma not as a human being, but as a subject, an acquisition, a project. The detachment was profound. They felt no guilt, expressed no remorse. To them, this was simply something they planned and executed successfully. Investigators began the painstaking process of reviewing everyone connected to the original case through this new lens. Who had access to the park regularly? Who matched this profile? Who disappeared or changed behavior around the time of the last notebook entry in May 1996? They looked at teachers, coaches, park employees, maintenance workers, volunteers, anyone who might have had opportunity and fit the psychological profile. One name emerged from the depths of the file. Not a suspect from the original investigation. Someone peripheral. Someone interviewed briefly as a witness and never considered again. Marcus Holland. In 1995, he was 41 years old, worked as a data analyst for a medical research company. He lived alone, about 2 miles from Riverside Park. He had been at the park the day Emma disappeared, confirmed by his own statement. He said he was there reading on a bench, taking a late lunch break. Multiple people vaguely remembered seeing a man matching his description. He was interviewed on September 16th, provided his information, was thanked and dismissed. Nothing about him raised flags at the time. No criminal history. Steady employment. Cooperative and calm during questioning. But now, looking back with fresh eyes, certain things stood out. Marcus had moved away from Millbrook in June 1996, right after the last notebook entry. He transferred within his company to a facility in Montana, sold his house quickly, left within 2 weeks. At the time, this wasn't suspicious. People relocate for work constantly, but the timing was interesting. Investigators tracked his movements after 1996. Montana for 3 years, then Washington State, then Arizona. He moved every few years, always for work, always alone, never married, no children, few close relationships. In 2010, Marcus Holland retired from his company at age 56. He moved to a small town in New Mexico, purchasing a modest house with cash. He lived quietly, kept to himself, maintained minimal contact with neighbors. And here's where things became more complicated. Marcus Holland died in 2016. Heart attack. He was 62. He was found 3 days after his death by a neighbor who noticed accumulated mail. He had no living relatives. No will. His property went through probate, was eventually sold. His belongings were dispersed or discarded. Sarah felt the case slipping away even as it broke open. Their best lead was a dead man, but she refused to give up. If Marcus Holland was responsible, there might be evidence in his past residences, his work history, his movements. She contacted police departments in every city he'd lived. She requested searches of property records, storage units, anything associated with his name. She coordinated with FBI agents who specialized in long-term missing persons cases. The breakthrough came from Montana. Marcus had rented a storage unit in Billings from 1996 to 1999. When he moved to Washington, he defaulted on the final month's payment. The contents were auctioned off. Standard procedure. The winning bidder, a reseller who bought storage units for profit, had kept records. He remembered that particular unit. Mostly boring stuff, he said. Office supplies, old computers, boxes of files. But there was one box that creeped him out, full of children's drawings, school photos, newspaper clippings about missing children. He'd thrown away, disturbed by it, not want to sell something so weird. This was 20 years ago. The reseller couldn't remember specific details, but he confirmed the time frame match. Marcus Holland had stored items in Montana that included materials related to missing children. It wasn't proof. It wasn't enough for a conviction, even if Marcus were alive. But combined with everything else, it painted a picture, a deeply disturbing picture. Sarah made another difficult call to Patricia. They had a strong theory about who took Emma, but the person was dead, and they still didn't know where Emma was or what happened to her. The notebook mentioned permanent placement. What did that mean? Adoption through illegal channels? Had Marcus sold Emma to someone? Had he kept her somewhere, raising her under a false identity? Or was permanent placement a euphemism for something far worse? The investigation expanded into Marcus Holland's entire life. Financial records were subpoenaed from banks where he'd held accounts. Credit card statements going back decades. Phone records from before he died. Investigators were looking for patterns. Unusual purchases, repeated trips to specific locations, contact with adoption agencies, both legal and suspected illegal ones, anything that might indicate what he did with the children he possibly took. Because Emma might not have been the only one. Daniel Richardson, now 30 years old, dedicated every free moment to helping with the investigation. He took leave from his job. He traveled to Montana, to Washington, to Arizona, to New Mexico. He interviewed people who knew Marcus, however slightly. Co-workers described him as quiet, competent, unremarkable. Neighbors said he was polite but distant. No one reported anything obviously wrong. No red flags. He was invisible in his normalcy, the perfect predator hiding in plain sight. In New Mexico, Daniel visited the house where Marcus had died. The current owners had renovated completely, but they let Daniel look around. He stood in rooms where Marcus had lived, trying to feel some connection to his sister's fate. In the garage, something caught his eye. The concrete floor had been patched in one corner. The owners said it was like that when they bought the place. The patch was crude, uneven, different from the rest of the floor. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. He called Sarah immediately. Getting permission to excavate was complicated. The current owners were understandably hesitant. Their home was being suggested as a potential crime scene, but they ultimately agreed, wanting closure for the Richardson family and the community. On January 14th, 2019, investigators carefully removed the concrete patch in Marcus Holland's former garage. Beneath, they found disturbed earth. They dug carefully, slowly, 6 inches down, 1 foot, 18 inches, and then a tarp, deteriorated, but intact enough to reveal its contents. Inside the tarp were more notebooks, 5 of them, each similar to the one found at Riverside Park, each containing entries about different subjects, different children. The dates span from 1987 to 2015, different locations, different descriptions, all written in the same detached, clinical style. The entries described acquisitions, monitoring, relocations. Marcus Holland had been abducting children for nearly 30 years. Emma was not his first victim. She wasn't even close to his last. The task force grew exponentially. FBI agents, specialists in child abduction, cold case detectives from multiple states. They began the heartbreaking work of trying to match the notebook entries to unsolved missing children cases. The descriptions were vague, intentionally coded, but patterns emerged. Locations matched. Time frames aligned. They identified at least 12 cases that potentially connected to Marcus Holland's activities. 12 families who might finally get answers. 12 children who disappeared and were never found. But the notebook still didn't reveal the most crucial information. Where were the children? The entries mentioned permanent placements for each subject. Some mentioned specific dates when projects concluded, but no locations, no names of accomplices or buyers if children were being trafficked, no burial sites if the worst had happened. Marcus Holland had documented his crimes, but left the most important details hidden. Then investigators found something that changed everything. In the last notebook, the one with entries dating up to 2015, there was a loose page tucked in the back. Not an entry, a list, names and locations, adult names, cities and states. 14 names total. No context, no explanation, just names and places. Sarah stared at that list, her mind racing. Could these be the permanent placements? Could these be the identities Marcus gave to the children he took? Or the people who received them? The investigation split into 14 simultaneous branches. Each name was researched. Background checks. Current addresses. Ages. Anything available. What they found was shocking. 7 of the names belonged to real people who existed and could be located. All were in their 20s and 30s. All had somewhat murky backgrounds regarding their early childhood. And all, when tracked down and interviewed, had stories that didn't quite add up. One woman, listed as Jennifer Collins in Phoenix, Arizona, was 29 years old. When investigators approached her with questions about her childhood, she became defensive. She said she was adopted as a young child, around age 7 or 8, through a private adoption. She didn't remember much before that. Her adoptive parents had died years ago. She had no records, no birth certificate she could find. Her Social Security number had been issued when she was 9, unusual but not impossible. When shown age-progressed photos of Emma Richardson, Jennifer paled. The resemblance was unmistakable. DNA testing was requested. Jennifer initially refused, frightened and confused. But as investigators explained the situation gently, compassionately, she agreed. The sample was rushed to the lab. Patricia Richardson was contacted. She provided her own DNA for comparison. The wait was excruciating. 72 hours felt like 72 years. On February 3rd, 2019, the results came back. Jennifer Collins and Patricia Richardson were a biological match, mother and daughter. After 23 years, Emma Richardson had been found. She was alive. She had been alive this entire time, living under a different name, with no memory of her real family or her real past. The reunion was arranged carefully. Psychologists were involved to help both women navigate the impossible emotions. Patricia traveled to Phoenix, her heart pounding, barely able to breathe. She walked into a room where a stranger sat. A stranger who was her daughter. Jennifer, Emma, looked at this woman who was her mother and felt nothing but confusion. She had no memory of being Emma. Her entire life was as Jennifer. The family she knew, though gone, had been her family. This was her identity. But DNA doesn't lie. The truth was undeniable. Patricia wept, reaching out but stopping herself, not wanting to overwhelm the daughter who didn't remember her. Jennifer sat frozen, processing information that shattered her understanding of her own existence. She had been stolen. Her whole life was based on a lie. The people who raised her, who she called mom and dad, had obtained her illegally. Everything she believed about herself was wrong. The investigation continued even as Emma's survival became international news. 6 other names on Marcus's list were similarly investigated. 2 more matches were made. 2 more families reunited with children stolen decades ago. Children who are now adults, living lives they thought were real, discovering identities they never knew existed. The emotional devastation was immeasurable. Joy and trauma intertwined impossibly. But not all the names on the list had happy endings. 3 led to people who had died years earlier under suspicious circumstances. Accidents, illnesses, causes that seemed natural but now warranted reinvestigation. For names couldn't be tracked at all. They led nowhere. Dead ends. Whether they were false identities, people who moved beyond finding, or something else entirely, investigators couldn't determine. The list still held secrets Marcus took to his grave. As for Emma, the woman now legally Jennifer Collins Richardson after changing her name to honor both identities, she faced an impossible journey. Therapy, hours of working through trauma she didn't even remember experiencing. Building a relationship with a mother she didn't recognize. Learning about a brother who never stopped hoping for her return. She struggled profoundly. Some days she was grateful to know the truth. Other days she wished she'd never been found, that her comfortable lie had remained intact. Patricia got her daughter back, but not the 7-year-old who vanished from the swing set. That child was gone forever. In her place was a traumatized adult trying to reconcile 2 incompatible realities. The relationship was fragile, complicated, filled with grief on both sides. But they tried. Every day they tried. Daniel became an unexpected anchor, the brother Emma didn't remember, but who remembered her completely. His steady presence helped bridge the impossible gap. The case of Marcus Holland remains open in multiple jurisdictions. Investigators continue trying to identify all his victims. The notebooks are studied obsessively for clues. Forensic teams have searched every property he ever owned or rented. They found evidence of other crimes. Identification cards belonging to missing children. Photographs. Personal items. But not all the answers. Some children are still missing. Some families are still waiting. The playground camera that was being installed when Emma's backpack was discovered now stands as a memorial. A reminder that vigilance matters. That technology can help prevent what happened in 1995. But also a reminder that monsters walk among us, wearing ordinary faces, living ordinary lives, hiding extraordinary evil. If this part is making sense, drop a comment with, "I'm still here," to let us know who's really watching to this point. The legal aftermath was complex. The people who adopted Emma, Jennifer's parents, were deceased, so no criminal charges could be filed against them. But investigations into how they obtained a child illegally led to the uncovering of an underground network that facilitated private adoptions, some legitimate, others deeply illegal. Marcus Holland had connections to people who could create false documents, establish new identities, and place children with families who asked no questions. The network was dismantled. Multiple arrests were made. But the architects of the system, like Marcus, were already gone. Patricia Richardson became an advocate for missing children, using her platform to push for legislative changes. Mandatory DNA databases for all missing children, better coordination between state and federal databases, more resources for cold cases. Her testimony before Congress was powerful, heartbreaking, and effective. New laws were passed in Emma's name. The Emma Richardson Act mandated specific protocols for investigating child abductions, ensuring cases couldn't go cold due to lack of resources or coordination. The town of Millbrook, Ohio, transformed that playground into a memorial park. Emma's name is engraved on a stone near where she was last seen. But it's not a memorial of death. It's a memorial of survival. A reminder that even when cases seem hopeless, truth can emerge, sometimes after decades, sometimes in ways no one expected. The park also features resources for parents about child safety, contact information for organizations that help families of missing children, and a wall listing other unsolved cases, keeping hope alive for other families still waiting. The psychological impact of the case extended far beyond the Richardson family. The revelation that Marcus Holland was a serial child abductor, that he kept meticulous records, that he operated for nearly 3 decades without detection, shook communities across the country. How many others might be out there? How many people living seemingly normal lives are harboring terrible secrets? The case spawned documentaries, books, psychological studies. Experts analyze how someone could compartmentalize so completely, could live a double life for so long. The consensus was disturbing. Many more such individuals likely exist, undetected, patient, careful, waiting. For Emma, now 31 years old, life remains a daily challenge. She works as a counselor for trauma survivors, using her own experience to help others. She's written a memoir about her journey, the fragmentation of identity, the struggle to integrate 2 separate selves. She maintains a relationship with Patricia and Daniel, though it's complicated. Some days are good. Some days the weight of everything is too much. She's in ongoing therapy, probably will be for life. The stolen years can't be returned. The childhood memories can't be implanted. But she's building something new, a life based on truth, however painful. Daniel Richardson eventually completed his degree and became an FBI agent specializing in missing persons cases. Emma's case shaped his entire life trajectory. He works tirelessly on cold cases, using technology and techniques that didn't exist in 1995. He's helped solve 17 cases in his career so far. 17 families who got answers. Not all the answers were happy, but closure matters. Not knowing is its own special torture. Michael Richardson, Emma's father, reunited with his daughter, though their relationship is perhaps the most strained. His decision to move away, to start over, created a distance that's hard to bridge. Emma understands intellectually, but emotionally, there's a barrier. He's a stranger who shares her DNA. They see each other occasionally. It's cordial, but the father-daughter bond that might have existed was severed that day in 1995 and couldn't be fully restored. The notebooks continue to be analyzed. Recently, a linguistic expert using artificial intelligence to parse the coded language made a breakthrough on one entry that had confused investigators. The entry mentioned a northern placement in the lake region dated in 1991. By cross-referencing missing children cases from that year with references to lakes and northern locations, they identified a potential match, a boy named Timothy Chun, who disappeared from a park in Minnesota. His family was contacted. The investigation is ongoing. There's hope that Timothy, like Emma, might be alive somewhere, living under a different name, unaware of his true past. Each discovery reopens old wounds for dozens of families. But most choose hope over ignorance. The families connected through Marcus Holland's crimes have formed a support network. They meet annually, share updates, support each other through the ongoing trauma. Patricia is a central figure in this group, her survival instinct and advocacy work inspiring others who are earlier in their journeys. The question that haunts everyone involved: how did Marcus Holland choose his victims? The notebooks reveal no clear pattern. Different ages, though mostly between 6 and 10 years old. Different genders, different locations. No obvious connections. This randomness makes his crimes even more terrifying. He could be anywhere, watching anyone. The selection seemed opportunistic, yet planned. A paradox that frustrates profilers. One theory suggests he targeted children who were momentarily unsupervised in public places. Parks, primarily. Shopping centers in 2 cases. A school playground after hours in another. He watched, waited, learned patterns, then acted when opportunity aligned with minimal risk. His ability to abduct children without witnesses suggests significant planning and surveillance. He wasn't impulsive. Every acquisition was calculated. The most disturbing notebook entry, one that investigators debate endlessly, is from 2002. It simply reads, Acquisition attempted. Subject resisted. Termination necessary. Disposal completed. Project abandoned. This entry suggests not all his attempts were successful, and at least once, when a child fought back or something went wrong, Marcus was willing to kill. Investigators have tried to match this entry to missing children cases from 2002, where remains were eventually found. 3 possibilities exist, none confirmed. The truth may never be known. As technology advances, there's hope that more answers will emerge. DNA phenotyping can create facial reconstructions from genetic material. Age progression software becomes more sophisticated. Databases expand. International cooperation improves. Cases once considered permanently cold are being reopened and solved. Marcus Holland's victims, those still unidentified, might yet be found. The list might yet reveal all its secrets. But some questions will never be answered. Why did Marcus do this? What drove him? The notebooks reveal what and when and partially how, but never why. He expressed no motive, no justification, no explanation. To him, these were simply projects. The absence of reasoning is perhaps the most chilling aspect. He felt no need to explain himself, even in private documentation. It simply was what he did, like a job, like a hobby, detached, clinical, inhuman. Emma struggles most with this void. She wants to understand why she was taken. What made Marcus choose her that day at Riverside Park? Was it random? Was there something specific? The not knowing creates a psychological gap that can't be filled. She's read the notebooks against the advice of her therapists. She thought understanding his process might help her heal. Instead, it reinforced the randomness, the meaninglessness. She was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, noticed by the wrong person. There's no closure in that truth. The community of Millbrook has tried to move forward while never forgetting. The case changed the town fundamentally. Trust was broken. Innocence was lost. But they've chosen to honor Emma's survival by creating a safer environment for current children. The playground has cameras now. There are community watch programs, educational sessions for parents about safety without paranoia, awareness without fear. It's a delicate balance. Every September 14th, a vigil is held at Riverside Park, not just for Emma, but for all the children on Marcus Holland's list, for the ones who were found and the ones still missing, for the families still hoping and the families who received devastating confirmations. The community comes together, lights candles, stands in solidarity. It's a reminder that these cases aren't just statistics. They're real people, real families, real lives shattered by evil. Patricia stands at these vigils, surrounded by other parents who understand her unique pain. She speaks when she can, though some years the emotions are too raw. She talks about resilience, about hope, about the importance of never giving up. Her strength inspires others. But privately, in moments alone, she still grapples with guilt. 30 seconds. That's all it took. 30 seconds of looking away. She knows intellectually that Marcus Holland is responsible, not her. But the guilt remains, a permanent scar on her soul. The investigators who worked the case, especially Detective Sarah Chun, carry their own burdens. Sarah retired in 2021. The Emma Richardson case, her final and most significant achievement. She solved it technically, found the victim alive, identified the perpetrator. But the lack of complete answers haunts her. The children still missing. The questions still unanswered. Retirement hasn't brought peace. She volunteers with missing persons organizations, unable to fully step away. In recent years, true crime enthusiasts have become fascinated with the case. Podcasts, documentaries, online forums dedicated to analyzing every detail. Some of this attention is helpful, generating new tips, keeping the case in public consciousness. But some is exploitative, treating real trauma as entertainment. Emma has had to set firm boundaries about her story being used without permission. It's a constant negotiation between wanting to help other victims and protecting her own mental health. The case has also raised questions about memory and identity. Emma's inability to remember her life before age 7 is not uncommon in trauma survivors. The The brain protects itself by suppressing unbearable experiences, but it creates philosophical questions. If you don't remember being someone, are you still that person? Emma is legally Emma Richardson again, but in her heart, in her sense of self, she's still primarily Jennifer. Therapy focuses on integration, not erasure. She doesn't have to choose. She can be both. It's a concept easier said than embraced. The items found in the container at Riverside Park are now stored as evidence, but Patricia has requested that eventually, when legal proceedings are completely finished, she might have Emma's backpack returned. That pink backpack, last touched by her 7-year-old daughter, represents the moment her world ended and, 23 years later, began again. It's both a relic of trauma and a symbol of survival. Marcus Holland House in New Mexico was eventually sold again. The new owners, fully aware of its history, got it at a significant discount. They've tried to bring light into a space that held darkness. They renovated extensively, blessed the property, tried to cleanse it of its past. But the garage floor, where the notebooks were found, remains concrete. They couldn't bring themselves to finish it. Some stains, even when invisible, remain. The children on Marcus's list who were never found. Their families live in a unique limbo. Emma's survival brought them hope. If she made it, maybe their children did too. Maybe somewhere they're alive, living different lives, unaware. But hope is torturous when unresolved. They wait for breakthroughs that may never come. They exist in the space between grief and expectation, unable to mourn, unable to celebrate. It's a psychological purgatory. Advanced genealogical DNA techniques, the same ones used to catch long-dormant serial killers, are now being applied to Marcus Holland's victims. Genetic material from items he stored is being used to build family trees, hoping to identify the children through relatives. It's painstaking, complicated work, but it's yielded results in other cases. There's reason for hope. The underground adoption network that Marcus utilized has been mostly dismantled, but investigators know it wasn't the only one. The demand for children from people willing to circumvent legal channels, combined with vulnerable children who could be exploited, creates a market that's difficult to fully eliminate. The work continues. Legislation has improved. Enforcement has intensified. But the problem persists. Emma's story has been used in FBI training programs as a case study. How a cold case can break open decades later with new technology and new evidence. How to approach victims who don't remember being victims. How to navigate the complex emotional terrain of reuniting families separated by crime. Her case has literally changed how missing persons investigations are conducted. That's her legacy, beyond her personal survival. The final question, the one people always ask, was justice served? Marcus Holland died before facing charges. He never stood trial, never heard Emma's impact statement, never faced the families he destroyed. He died peacefully, in his sleep, believing he'd gotten away with everything. Some see this as the ultimate injustice. Others find solace that he can never hurt another child. The debate continues. For Emma, justice is less about punishment and more about reclamation. She exists. She survived. She's telling her story. That's her justice. Marcus Holland tried to erase her identity, to turn her into a project, a subject. But she remains. She endures. She's reclaiming the name he tried to steal. That victory matters more than any courtroom verdict ever could. The playground camera that indirectly led to the discovery of the container still operates today. It's monitored by the Park District, with footage reviewed regularly. In 5 years of operation, it's helped locate 3 lost children quickly, prevented 2 potential abductions by its mere presence, and provided evidence in 1 assault case. The camera Emma's case made possible has already protected others. The irony is profound. As this account concludes, the Richardson family continues their journey. Patricia, now 68 years old, has found a measure of peace. Not complete, never complete, but sustainable. She has a relationship with her daughter, fragile but real. She has a son who became an agent of change. She has a purpose in advocacy work. The nightmare that began in 1995 hasn't ended, but she's learned to live within it, to find meaning despite it. Emma continues therapy, continues writing, continues helping others. She's engaged now, planning a small wedding. Her fiancé knows her full story, loves her through all the complexity. She's building a future that honors both her pasts. It's not the life she would have chosen, but it's hers. She owns it. Daniel works another case right now. A child who disappeared 3 years ago. A family desperate for answers. He thinks about Emma every single day. She's his why, his motivation, his reminder that even in the darkest cases, hope can survive, sometimes for decades, sometimes against all odds. The lessons from this case reverberate through law enforcement, through communities, through families everywhere. Watch your children, but don't smother them with fear. Report suspicious behavior, but don't see threats everywhere. Remember that evil exists often in ordinary disguises, but also that survival is possible, that truth can emerge, that families can heal, even when broken. The notebooks Marcus left behind are analyzed still. Each read-through reveals new potential meanings, new possible connections. The work continues. It will continue for years, perhaps decades. Every child deserves to be identified. Every family deserves answers. The commitment to that principle drives everyone involved. What happened to Emma Richardson should never have happened. That a child could be stolen from a playground, her identity erased, her life stolen, is an unconscionable evil. But that she survived, that she was found, that she's reclaiming her story, that matters in the balance between darkness and light. Her survival tips the scale just slightly toward hope, and that has to be enough. What's your take on this story? Do you think all of Marcus Holland's victims will eventually be found? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story moved you, hit the like button and share it with someone who appreciates true crime documentaries done right. And if you want more deep dives into cases that defy explanation, cases where truth emerges from decades of darkness, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Next week, we're covering a case where a woman received a phone call from her deceased husband 10 years after his funeral. You won't believe where that investigation led. Thanks for watching, and remember, the truth always finds a way, even when it takes 23 years.